Somebody that you like, tell somebody that you know how that go. Hey, man, you know, it's hell, man. I'm like, bro, what? I'm fucked up on how you came to me. I was like, this shit, you know, I was writing in the comments and don't really did. That's why I was telling you to read the comment, bro. But it's good, bro. Like you said, what you did. I ain't gonna. Hey, you better, you saying bitch, no curveball type of shit. The person said, I ain't doing it. No, I mentioned it because you know, I thought about it. Like, the reason why I'm Christian, but still, they like a fan of see that. You ain't got to bring it up. Look, I'm supposed to. You ain't gonna do nothing but make a nigga got out. This is channel. Hey, how you doing? Good morning. Hold on, let me get my lighting again. Yeah, right. Oh. NBA stand for no bullshit allowed, and my name is Herman. NBA stand for no bullshit allowed. That's what it stands for. Yeah, I am right about What up? What up? And it's sustainable, and we have had the change in the shape and the phase of the conflict, and accordingly, Iran has tried to adapt to the situation. For some time, the western borders were bombed heavily. That's why Iran sent emergency ground forces there to engage with a potential separatist groups entering into the country. And at the moment, what we are seeing is mostly, it is focused on the civilian structures and things. Maybe the aim is to bring, to intimidate the public, to create a sense of fear and uncertainty in the country. Lena, you mentioned that Iran's military capabilities have been heavily degraded, and I think there's no doubt about that. I would like to point out to our viewers, we're taking the information that is given publicly by the Israelis, by the Americans, also by the Iranians. Very hard to actually get independent confirmation. Still, every bit of information we have points to the fact that, yes, Iran's military capabilities have been heavily degraded. Americans and Israelis say they've hit more than 15,000 targets in this span of almost 2 weeks. But Lena, Iran is signaling that they're not going anywhere. That they can carry on this conflict even in a degraded fashion for a very, very long time, and they can against the very raison d'être of this regime. So they will fight till the end, but will they be able to have the same capacity as they do so? No, their military capabilities are degraded, and even when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, Iran itself exports most of its own oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and it is not in its interest to disrupt it fully. We have only seen, for example, Iran plant 10 mines in the Strait of Hormuz, even though it could do more than that. And that's because mines are unpredictable in terms of where they might move with the movement of water, for example. And so Iran will have shot itself in the foot if it were to plant a lot more mines that might be able, that might later disrupt its own trade activity. And so, really, I think Iran is quite curtailed and will not be able to sustain the current. Lena Khatib from Chatham House, Abbas Aslani joining us from Tehran. Thank you very much to both of you for joining. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the Iranian leadership is in disarray after the deaths of so many senior figures. Speaking at a briefing at the Pentagon, Hegseth claimed U.S. forces have wiped out much of Iran's Navy and Air Force, along with most of its missile and drone capabilities.
have been rallying in the capital, Tehran. They are marking Al-Quds Day, an annual show of support for the Palestinian people, as well as a day of national pride in Iran. Airstrikes were reported along the route of the march, with at least one woman killed. Rescuers are searching for survivors after an Israeli airstrike in a residential neighborhood in Tehran. Israel had issued forced evacuation orders for parts of the capital and Kasdim in the north. It says it is continuing wide-scale attacks across Iran. The U.S. Defense Secretary XF has described Iran's attempt to block the Strait of Hormuz as an act of desperation. Hundreds of ships remain stranded in the region. Associated Press reporter Inzamam Rashid has more from Dibba in the UAE just by the Strait of Hormuz. Are around 1,000 ships still anchored in the water here towards the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz and in the waters around it. 200 of them are tankers. You may be able to see some in the distance there, containers just waiting. They've been there for around 8 or 9 days or so since the Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed by the Iranian military. We know usually this is a very tap for the light, man. Through it, and around 20 million barrels of oil every single day. There's not been any near those numbers over the last 9 days or so. The only tankers that have managed to get through are, in fact, the ones exporting Iranian oil, mainly to China. In fact, Iran has been exporting much more oil than it in normal times when the Strait of Hormuz is open. Of course, they have full control. Double tap for the thumbs up. Because there are threats that they will be targeted, and we've seen that over the last in particular. Now, the Joint Maritime Information Center has suggested that threat level in these waters right now is at critical. They've done a risk assessment, and that is their assessment of the waters right now. And we can say that because there have been several attacks by the Iranian military on a number of ships. The U.S. will temporarily allow countries to buy sanctioned Russian oil and petroleum products. The Treasury Department says the 30-day reprieve will apply only to vessels which are already loaded. The move is the latest attempt by the Trump administration to stabilize energy markets. The conflict in the Middle East has disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, as you were just hearing. It is crucial to the transport of oil and gas from the Gulf to their consumers and their customers around the world. On Thursday, the U.S. announced the release of 172 million barrels of oil from a strategic reserve. European leaders have raised concern about the purchase of Russian oil due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. In fact, at a joint press conference in Paris, the presidents of both France and Ukraine warned that the U.S. easing sanctions on Russian oil as a result of the Iran war would hurt peace efforts in Europe. This easing alone by the United States could provide Russia with about $10 billion for the war. This certainly does not help peace. As for the Europeans and France, the sanctions must be maintained, and the situation in no way justifies them. Stock indexes on Wall Street have lost some ground in morning trading on Friday as the fallout from the war with Iran keeps pressure on oil prices, destabilizing the global economy. Al Jazeera's Kristen Sulumi joins us live from the New York Stock Exchange. So, Kristen, decipher the markets for us. There have been wild swings in the last few days. They've been very volatile. You're reporting on it. What are you seeing today? Yeah, it's really interesting. Today, we're seeing the exact opposite of where we were yesterday. Yesterday, the markets closed lower with oil prices up. Today, the markets opened with oil prices down and markets up. A complete reversal. So what we're seeing is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility, as you mentioned, and investors basically reacting to the latest news cycle. And the latest news cycle included the suspension of those sanctions on Russian oil. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, saying that the war is going to plan, downplaying the risks of Iran stopping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. All of that
playing with investors as they make these moves, not dramatic swings up and down, but swings back and forth. We've been seeing it all week. At the same time, we've had some other economic indicators coming through today that show that growth in 2025, the last quarter of 2025, wasn't as strong as initially reported here. Inflationary pressures continue. So all of that is just rumbling along and keeping the markets sort of steady, but very volatile. Big picture here, I think if you pull back, you see that oil prices overall come down from their peak during this conflict, but they're still higher than they were before it started. So that's important. And also another thing that we're seeing, all of these inflationary pressures ongoing, expectations are now that the Federal Reserve will not cut interest rates whether it's next week. That is something that investors were counting on to happen at some point this year. One, two. Is it me?
Senators testifying in front of the House Oversight Committee. I did it for two reasons. First, I love my country, including our Constitution. And America was built on the idea that no person is above the law, even presidents, especially presidents, and that we should all live under the same set of rules. This kind of democracy requires every person to play their part. And I hope that by being here today, we can bring ourselves just a little further away from the brink and back to being a country where we can disagree civilly and we can search for truth and justice, and that it outweighs the partisan urge to score points, whose lives Jeffrey Epstein destroyed, deserve not just justice, but healing. They've been waiting too long for both. Though my brief acquaintance with Epstein ended years before his crimes came to light, and though I never witnessed during our limited
Double tap, double tap, double tap.
indication what was truly going on, I offered the little I do know in the hopes that it would help prevent anything like this from ever happening again. I also have to say the crimes Epstein was committing, no matter how many photos they showed me, I have two things that at the end of the day matter far more than any interpretation of 20-year-old photos. I know what I saw, and more importantly, what I didn't see. And I know what I did, and more importantly, what I didn't do. I saw nothing and did nothing wrong. As someone who grew up in a home with domestic violence, not only would I not have flown on his plane if I had any inkling of what he was doing, I would have turned him in myself and led the call for justice for his crimes, not the sweetheart deal we got. But even with 2020 hindsight, I saw nothing that ever gave me real pause. We're only here today because Epstein hid it from everyone so well for so long. And by the time it came to light with his 2008, the crimes Epstein was committing, no matter how many photos they showed me, I have two things that at the end of the day matter far more than any interpretation of 20-year-old photos. I know what I saw, and more importantly, what I didn't see. And I know what I did. And please, I have not stopped associating with it.